There's this old theory that people with attention deficit disorder were the ones that were valued for their ability to notice things, like the lion about to pounce on you and eat you, before others were. While this theory is nice for predicting situations that endanger life and limb, it also accurately describes how I feel when I'm walking around outside my apartment. I feel like the part of me that would naturally navigate the world around me without me being aware of it doesn't or can't keep its various observations to itself. Every person, what they're wearing, that must be freezing. How they're walking, constantly recalculating the fastest path through the traffic of people. From the cracks in the sidewalk, safety hazard. Low-hanging branch, tall person clearance. Birds flying overhead, potential poo drops. Oh, squirrel, how cute! This has uses in detecting potential dangers, errors, and sometimes it's just generally entertaining. On the other hand, particularly when you pair it with my OCD or autism, attention deficit disorder has some major downsides. Shiny rock, gotta pick it up, OCD. Cute girl, stylish clothes, nice face, why can't I wear sandals like that? Hack, I've been staring too long, autism. Even just on its own, attention deficit disorder, without any breaks, will drive you crazy as you open yourself up and try to notice everything all at once. Weird sound, must identify. Taller person, do I measure up? Short person, gee, I feel so big and awkward. Ducks, flowers, wasps. One good real-life example for this, for me, was going to various museums in Europe. In the age before camera phones, I walked through every museum trying to make sure I saw everything. There was the occasional stops at this piece or that, but in general, I threw my attention deficit disorder into full drive and tried to flash look at everything. Then came the Mona Lisa. I remember looking at that. I also remember looking at the painting, but also at the frame, and the cracks in the canvas, and the lighting in the background, and the distance of the painting, and the double frame that was locked behind, and the railing blocking the way, and security, and the security cams. And no, I wasn't considering stealing it, but the very nature of attention deficit disorder is to take in everything without really thinking about it. It has been said of people with attention deficit disorder that they just might be adrenaline junkies. That some people with attention deficit disorder are thrilled with seeking out situations that will provide a rush. Over the years, I've wondered that about myself. It is possible that if I had just had attention deficit disorder, I might have been like that. I know for certain I've had poor impulse control. However, the autism, obsessive compulsive disorder, and depression managed to put a damper on some of the more risky, life and limb-threatening activities I could have performed. Instead, I tended more towards taking risks with various situations. For example, I would be at home, and because I always had failing grades, I was banned or grounded for years from my beloved Super Nintendo. I would find it highly exhilarating to see just how I could sneak in playtime. One of those schemes I'm more proud of was when I stuck my monitor into the floor of the house. Since my bedroom was where the access to that area was. There was no basement, just the cutout for the underneath the house thing. And then I ran the cord up through the hole in the floor, covered by dirty clothes, into an electrical socket. And then in the middle of the night, I would crack open, peer down, and play my little video games all night long. Sure, the video game was fun, but the idea of sudden death looming over my head, thinking that I might get caught at any time, was an adrenaline rush in and of itself. Even within the video games that I played, even after all the joy has gone out of playing, the game was gone, and I played it into the ground, arranging sudden death scenarios like spying on the enemy, not ever getting hit, Or my personal favorite, killing large groups of things that were chasing me down, where the slightest mistake would result in my messy demise, always made it stimulating again. Why is it like this? Why is this adrenaline rush so attractive? I drove my parents nuts that I could devote all this energy to unproductive vices and behaviors, but I couldn't apply it to anything useful. In hindsight, I believe I have the answer now. There are two ways to try to manage attention deficit disorder. Either by letting it run you into the ground by giving it free rein, or to suppress it. Either way, it still takes an enormous amount of energy. Adrenaline provides an outside source of energy, something that is typically not part of the daily reserves. Adrenaline in medical practice can give the person the ability to do things that they never would or shouldn't be able to do. Restart a heart, ward off sleep, run harder, jump farther, last longer. However, there's a price to pay for it. Adrenaline isn't made to be a constant source of energy. It's like a cheap fix. It doesn't last, and when it runs out, you suffer a major crash from it. So I would stay up all night playing video games, getting my fix, and then I'd fall asleep in class the next day. Although I'm sure the lack of sleep at the appropriate time did have something to do with it. However, the greatest price I've discovered for this was how this adrenaline rush winds up being confused with the real activity of concentration. What do I mean by this? Well, let me give a demonstration. Sort of point-to-point scenario that basically covers and describes how I grew up in school. Now, procrastination aside, which you don't need attention deficit disorder for, a child with ADHD cannot concentrate on his schoolwork. All attempts at learning, well, fail. This failure leads to the child to feel bad about himself as he continues to struggle to find the thing that people call concentration. In the search for concentration, it is discovered either by the child or pointed out to him by his parents when he's engaging in those adrenaline rush behaviors that are so inappropriate that he is concentrating, or at least he seems to be. In essence, he is applying his focus on a certain task. The child then attempts to force his brain to engage in maintaining that thought pattern, those feelings, that surge of energy when he's supposed to be studying. The problem here is, while it appears he is performing the appropriate behavior on the outside, what he's doing inside to get that behavior isn't what he should be doing. At this point, the child is associated hyperfocusing from the adrenaline rushes with the term concentration and focus. However, since this source of focusing isn't natural, the child eventually burns himself out trying to maintain this type of concentration. For me, the longest I managed to maintain my concentration was maybe 2.5 weeks. So, child has a crash. This can take many forms. Either they sleep it off, or they go crazy off the wall, or they crumple up and have an emotional meltdown. Whatever the result, it typically isn't good or acceptable. So, life or school doesn't stop to let someone have a meltdown. They just have to still do all their schoolwork while having their meltdown and can't focus. So they keep having to procrastinate the recovery right up until the end of the school semester. In the end, the child isn't happy that he didn't live up to his instructors, or his parents' expectations, and wonders what's wrong with him. So, every year, it's the same plan. Do better, apply new strategies, and start with a fresh slate. Improve, try harder, concentrate. Authority figures constantly say, "We know you can do it. We've seen you do it." The trouble is, since the only association the child has with concentration and focus is an unnatural thought pattern, the results are only going to be the same: burnout. So, after years of repeated failure, the unrelenting frustration at not being able to solve this puzzle, despite therapy and treatments and support, after watching his peers at school maintain their focus just fine throughout school and wondering why he is so different, a child will burn out unbelieving in himself, either submitting to the idea that he must be designed to be bad, since that's the only time he can do well, when he's doing something risky or seriously wrong, or he enters a state called learned helplessness, where he feels no matter what he does, his situation will never change, and sinks into depression. I fell into this latter category. This was my life, struggling to maintain my focus through a brain that had crashed. It felt like forcing your way through this sticky mud in the middle of a fog while mosquitoes of attention deficit disorder continued to distract me. During those times, I would do just about anything to clear that fog, even for a moment. One of the tactics I used was to hit my head against a book or wall. Jolting my head was just enough of a distraction to clear my mind for a few moments. It took me 20 years to associate the headaches I used to get all the time at night with my head thumping activity during the day. I know, big duh. But at the time, if you don't have attention deficit disorder and want an idea as to how this head fog feels, just recall those times you're woken up, but your mind is still groggy. And then imagine this unseen finger that keeps poking at your head in its foggy state. And then consider having that feeling all day long. What desperate acts would you take to get relief, just for a moment? What is sad here is the fact that what I had was mostly just a failed association. Granted, it was one that got ground into me as a nearly unbreakable habit. But still, in the beginning, that's all it was. We are all alone in our own heads. Nothing and no one, at least as far as I knew at the time back then, could have looked at me when I was supposedly concentrating and seen me and known that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. I looked like I was, but inside I really wasn't. The course that I set for myself in my mind was doomed to fail at the start. It was always assumed that the failure by everyone around me was my fault because I didn't care or I didn't try hard enough. The act of learning shouldn't ever be painful. Challenging, perhaps, yes. But God, or evolution, has ensured that only the species that can learn from its mistakes will make it to the top of the food chain. Humans wouldn't be here where we are now if learning in and of itself sucked and we avoided or failed at it. However, learning is more than just an action taken. It's a type of thinking and feeling. If you don't understand how that works and you're going to do it poorly, you just ain't going to do it well at all. For me, this is what living with my attention deficit disorder was like.